write down Erin's name, okay? And Erin, even though she's technically in your department, whatever, that's okay. All right. And then anybody need a 9 o'clock? Okay, Nisha, why don't you go ahead and write down Mr. Lord's name. Okay, so write down Mike. Okay, all right, so here's the thing. Since the dot cam is not being my friend at the moment, originally I was going to model a little bit of this for you, and we were going to do part of the first one together because it's one of the lengthier ones. That's okay, we'll talk through it. Okay, so if you folks could go ahead and grab this blue paper right here. And also have your pen or pencil handy. There are also highlighters in the bins. If you like using highlighters to kind of pull out parts of the text, you can do that too. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, well, it doesn't matter. They couldn't read my handwriting anyway, honestly, so whichever. That's not looking good. Okay, so for 12 o'clock, all of these different sections focus on POP, right, or pure observation in some form. But this one is called A Different Approach, and it's from that same educational leadership article, May 2014. I like the fact that it's recent. That kind of makes me feel good. Some of the sources that I had that were my other options were older, some of them from the 80s, and so I really didn't feel like sharing those in 1985. Okay, so anyway, one thing that I'm going to be asking you folks is as you're going through here, I mentioned critical thinking earlier and I showed you guys the wheel and that kind of stuff. What I want you to keep in mind is as we're going through each of these sections, you know that ultimately what I'll be asking you to do on this paper is for each appointment time that you have, I'll be asking you to find a piece of evidence from that section that you find to be compelling for some reason, and writing down a small part of that right here. So you'll notice they're labeled for 12, 3, 6, 9, whatever, okay? Then, after you've written down that small piece of evidence, I'll ask you to write down viewpoint. What does the evidence mean? What is it really saying, and why is that important? Now that's something, we used a similar organizer for the writing prompt. When I went back and looked at the wording on this paper, a lot of kids didn't use this paper, but when I went back and looked at the wording on it, I went, I wonder if the reason why a lot of kids chose not to use it is because it wasn't worded in a way that was very kid-friendly for them to understand what that middle column was all about. I don't know, some of them think analysis and they go, therapy, well, no. Okay, and then finally, your thinking. So that'll be how it connects with your own experience to POP and that kind of stuff. So ultimately, that's what we're aiming for. So you know that when you look at this, we are examining the information that's provided here. We're trying to pull out different pieces from it that we think are significant. So you might want to underline or highlight or something like that. And also I'm going to be asking you to make some sense of it. So you're going to want to write down maybe your inferences or something like that, or possibly some questions that you have. Because oftentimes if you write down a good question, you've already kind of figured it out by the time you've drawn the question mark, right? So that's what I'm going to be asking you to do as we go through here. So anyway, I'm just going to read this first little blurb aloud, and then let's try to pull out a piece of evidence, maybe from that first part that strikes you. And then you can write down an inference, or you can write down a question, or even just a comment if you want. Teacher-driven observation addresses these problems by empowering teachers with a classroom-embedded process to refine their instruction. Huh? I mean, honestly, as a reader, sometimes it takes me a while to get my bearings, and I'm going, what did I just read there? So I have to read it again. Teacher-driven observation addresses these problems by empowering teachers with a classroom-embedded process to refine their instruction. Okay, I need to give you guys just a little bit of background there. The problem that they're talking about is isolation. They're talking about when teachers are isolated and when they're not able to get together with peers or really talk through things or whatever, okay? Through teacher-driven observation, teachers engage peers in gathering and analyzing classroom data, data that speak to the unique context of their own classrooms. This approach has demonstrated potential to meaningfully improve instruction and student achievement. So when I'm thinking about this part, teachers engage peers in gathering and analyzing classroom data. The whole thing about data, even though I'm not a huge data fan, in fact I'm kind of a data phobe, I like that word being in here because we're focusing on information in the classroom observation, not on judgments. Existing approaches to observation generally serve the observer. Teacher-driven observation flips this approach, placing the observed teacher as leader and primary learner in the observation process. So another thing that you might write on here is you might write down a connection that you have. So for one, this connects very closely to our model of peer observation. Bless you. There's a few of them out there. I mean, some of them are where, like we're doing it, where the teacher, the host teacher, is the one who tells their peers in the group, this is what I want you to look for, this is what I want you to focus on, collect this data for me, please. Other models are a little bit different. It's where there might be a lesson study or something like that, where teachers all get together, design a lesson together, or have a common focus together, and then they all do the same thing with everybody observing. So that's another model that you can go about it. I mean, there's all kinds of different things out there, but this connects with what we're doing, so that's what I would have written down. The observed teacher identifies the focus of the observation, developing a question that reflects an area about which he or she wants to learn more, and that connects to the relationship between the teacher's instructional methods and students' learning. So I would have underlined the part, an area about which he or she wants to learn more. And then I also would have connected that back to the look-fors and thought maybe about my own evaluation from the fall and thought about what is it exactly that other people have told me in the past that I know myself that maybe I want to focus on for this next round. Bless you. An educator may want to explore how to develop his students' ability to solve multi-step word problems or how to increase student engagement in class discussions. She may hope to improve instruction related to a curricular standard. With a clear focus in mind, the observed teacher invites colleagues to collect classroom data related to that focus. And that whole word there, invites, too. I pick up on that because that to me is a word that has a lot of positive presupposition. It's where you're saying, hey, I'm open. I want you to come in and tell me about this thing that I know I want to improve. Please come in and tell me what I can do here about this. I don't necessarily want to know about all of it. You don't have to tell me about the fact that you don't like the way I interact with students. That's not what I asked you for. Instead, I asked you for questioning, or I asked you to look more at my release and how that goes with the group work or something like that. Okay? But anyway. So I hope that you guys have a couple of ideas written down. They might be questions, they might be inferences, or they might be connections. And then if you also notice there, underneath, I pulled in another source, and this is from a book called Never Underestimate Your Teachers, and it comes from page 46. We got peer observation is critical for expanding teachers' repertoire of skills and helping them think critically about their practice. So the whole thing of critical for expanding teachers' repertoire of skills. Because if the only practice you know is your own, you can't really move, right? You got to see other stuff that's out there in order to steal. Or borrow, but I like steal. Teachers need to see examples and non-examples of effective practice, walkthroughs, observations, and discussions, and giving and receiving peer feedback not only provide teachers exemplars of good practice, they help teachers think critically about what works and doesn't work in their own classroom. The whole thing of give and take too, because I know our POP focuses on the host and on what the host wants. But even so, even though we're collecting data for somebody else, we still get something out of going to observe anyway. I mean, there's always a couple of things that you might see that you can grab and you can take back to your own classroom. So, anyway. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and move into our first appointment time. But when we do, obviously, I kind of took this one over a little bit, talked you guys through what I might have written down on my paper and the parts that I might have circled or underlined or highlighted, whatever, right? But you haven't had an opportunity to discuss it yet. And discussion is really important because what it does is it helps people to sort through their thinking on it, like, do I really think this? Do I really believe this? Do I agree with this or not? And it also allows them to hear maybe another perspective on it, which can change people's thinking a little bit, and that's a very powerful tool, okay? So even though you've already read it and you might be like, I'm ready to move on, it's important for you to take the time to go ahead and talk about it. So let's go ahead and please move into your 12 o'clock. Now this appointment time is going to be short. I'm only going to give you 3 minutes to share the things that you highlighted or underlined, and then some of your ideas around those things. And then also, don't forget, you don't have to do this right away, okay? Once the appointment time is over, once I call time, that's when I'll ask you to write down your ideas into this organizer. So don't worry about this yet. Okay, go ahead and meet with your 12 o'clock. I'll just come over here. Oh, there we go. I know. Sticking here.